The night my own son shoved a wrinkled 20 into my hand and told my wife and me to get out, I felt something inside me crack the way old porch steps do when winter comes too early. He didn't shout. That almost made it worse. Travis looked me straight in the eye with that calm, cold tone young people use when they think age has made you slow, confused, or easy to move aside. Mabel stood beside me clutching her little brown purse like it was a life jacket, her knuckles pale, her breathing thin. "Dad, you and Mom, you're making things complicated," he said, as if we were strangers renting his basement. "Here, take this. It'll get you through a couple of days." $20. After 38 years of raising him, feeding him, patching up his scraped knees, and later his broken marriage, $20 was our farewell gift. I remember the smell of lemon cleaner in the hallway, the kind Jenna liked to use, strong enough to sting the eyes. I glanced at the family photos still hanging on the wall, except half of them were missing, replaced by abstract prints that had no story behind them, no warmth. Something inside me burned with embarrassment, rage, grief, all mixed into one tight knot I didn't know how to swallow. At my age, feelings don't come one by one. They arrive like a storm front, heavy and low. Right there, in that moment of humiliation, something else rose inside me. The quiet stubbornness older men grow with time. I turned to Mabel, squeezed her hand, and felt her trembling stop just a little. Before we stepped out, before the door closed on us, and on the decades we spent building that home, I felt a strange need to speak, as if to the world itself. I said softly, "Subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments how old you are and where you're from. For you, it's just a small thing. But for me, it's the reason I keep telling these stories." It wasn't a plea, just the way older men talk when they're trying not to fall apart. When we walked out onto that cold porch, I didn't realize fate had plans for us that Travis would never see coming. I didn't realize that one day, he'd be the one standing outside a door we owned, begging to come in. But before the day he returned to us, something happened that changed Mabel and me forever. The morning after we were thrown out, Mabel and I sat on a bus bench that smelled faintly of old newspapers and someone's forgotten sandwich, trying to pretend we still had a plan. I kept patting my pockets like an anxious squirrel, hoping I'd suddenly find a hidden stash of money, or at least a clean handkerchief, but all I pulled out was an expired coupon for pancakes. "Well," I said, offering it to Mabel like a treasure, "breakfast is on me, if we invent a time machine." She finally laughed, a thin, tired little laugh, but it was something, and I held on to it the way a man holds onto the edge of a cliff. I wasn't angry at Travis yet. Anger takes time to heat in men my age. First comes confusion, then shame, then the slow, bitter realization that you raised someone who forgot where he came from. As we rode the bus across town, I kept seeing flashes of him as a boy, the way he'd cling to my leg after his first day of school, or how he'd fall asleep on my chest during storms. Now he couldn't wait to see my back walking out his door. I stared at my hands and saw the shakes starting, the kind that come when emotion and age mix like cheap bourbon and stubbornness. "Don't start that," I muttered to myself. "You'll look old." Mabel leaned over and whispered, "Walter, you are old." I rolled my eyes and said, "Not helpful, dear." We reached the only motel that still had a neon sign buzzing loud enough to scare off mosquitoes. The carpets were so stained you couldn't tell the design from the disasters, and the front desk clerk moved slower than my arthritis on a rainy day. But the moment we sat on that sagging mattress, something inside me shifted. I realized this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning forced on us by someone who didn't think we'd survive without him. And nothing motivates an old man more than proving someone wrong, especially his own child. That night, while Mabel slept curled up like a worn-out cat, I lay awake, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked suspiciously like Abraham Lincoln. I whispered to it, because sometimes talking to ceilings is easier than talking to people. "We're not done." Not yet. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes before a storm a man chooses instead of fears. The next morning, without knowing it, we would take the first step toward the life that would one day bring Travis back to our doorstep. A life he never believed we could build without him. And that step began with a phone call I almost didn't answer. The phone on the motel nightstand rang the next morning with the kind of shrill determination only old electronics possess, like it knew we didn't want to answer and took it personally. I nearly fell off the bed reaching for it. and Mabel muttered, "If you break a hip, Walter, I'm leaving you for the manager downstairs." At least he moved slow enough for me to catch him. I grunted something dignified, or I meant to. It probably came out as a groan, and pressed the phone to my ear. It was my old friend Everett, a man I hadn't spoken to in years, calling out of nowhere. "Heard you two got tossed out like last week's leftovers," he said gently, in that voice people use when they're trying not to sound like they're gossiping. "I've got a place. Nothing fancy. Needs work. A lot of work. But it's yours if you want it." I looked over at Mabel, hair sticking up in places hair shouldn't stick, and she raised one eyebrow like she was negotiating with fate itself. "How bad is the place?" I asked. Everett paused a little too long. "Well, let's just say raccoons have more ownership papers than I do. Still, pride tastes worse than raccoon musk, so we accepted. When we reached the house, if you could call it that, it looked like someone had tried to build a cabin using instructions meant for a birdhouse and gave up halfway. The porch leaned like it was drunk, the mailbox was missing a door, and one window was held together with duct tape and prayer. I stood there scratching my chin, trying to appear optimistic. "Looks sturdy," I lied. The moment I said it, a shingle slid off the roof, bounced twice, and landed right at my feet like it wanted to challenge me to a duel. "But Mabel," she walked forward slowly, touching the railing, stepping around the weeds, almost studying it. "Walter," she said softly, "it just needs someone to care for it." That woman could find hope in a burnt slice of toast. We spent the next days patching walls, sweeping out critters, and discovering things we weren't emotionally ready for, like a squirrel that had apparently decided the bedroom closet was its summer home. At one point, I swung a hammer and accidentally smashed my own thumb so hard I invented 3 new silent expressions of pain. Mabel just patted my shoulder and said, "That's what you get for thinking you're 30. But something in me lit up, something Travis had pushed down years ago. Working with my hands again made me feel alive, like the world hadn't finished with us yet. The house began to look less like a disaster and more like a future we could claim. And just when hope started to feel familiar again, Mabel found an envelope wedged under a loose floorboard, one addressed to me, in handwriting I recognized immediately. When I opened it and saw who it was from, the past I tried to bury came crashing back into the room. I knew that handwriting before I even touched the envelope, sharp, slanted letters that always looked like they were running late for something. It belonged to my brother, Leonard, a man who could turn a family gathering into a tax audit just by walking through the door. He and I hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years, not since he borrowed my lawnmower and returned it with a dead squirrel inside. I opened the envelope carefully, partly because I was nervous, partly because the glue was so old it turned into dust on my fingers. Inside was a short letter, written in Leonard's usual dramatic style, as if every sentence were etched onto a courtroom plaque. He bought this old house decades ago, fixed it for a while, then abandoned it when life got too noisy, whatever that meant for him. And then came the line that made my palms sweat. "If you're reading this, Walt, it means I've passed on. The property is yours. Use it better than I did." I must have read it 3 times before Mabel gently took it from my hands, her face softening. "Walter, you never told me he left it to you." I shrugged, embarrassed. "I didn't know. Last time he wrote me, he only sent coupons for canned beans." For a moment, I just stood there, letting the strange mix of grief and responsibility settle into my bones. It felt odd mourning a man I'd spent years being irritated by. But there was history there, complicated, loud, messy family history. And maybe, just maybe, this house was his way of saying sorry the only way he knew how, through a legal document instead of an actual conversation. Mabel touched my arm, and in her gentle way, said, "Well, looks like the raccoons were just renting from you this whole time." I snorted, which startled her because apparently I don't snort often enough. "Great," I murmured. "I become a landlord at 64. Should I start wearing suspenders and yelling at teenagers on bicycles?" She grinned. "You already do that." Touché. But the truth was bigger than jokes. For the first time since Travis threw us out, I felt something stabilizing inside me, like the ground wasn't shaking anymore. This wasn't just shelter. It was a place that belonged to us, truly and legally. A place where no one could shove a 20 into my hand and tell me to leave. That realization rooted itself deep in me, warming parts of my heart I thought had gone cold permanently. So we worked harder, cleaned deeper, repaired faster. I even learned how to use one of those new power drills, though the first time I turned it on, I pressed the wrong button and it spun so fast I nearly drilled a hole into thin air. Mabel laughed so hard she had to sit down on a paint bucket. "If you ruin the house before we finish renovating it," she wheezed. "I'm telling people a ghost did it." But the more we fixed, the more the house seemed to wake up. Beams solidifying, floors leveling, walls brightening. And in the middle of that progress, of that new beginning rising from years of silence and humiliation, something happened that neither of us expected. A letter arrived in the mailbox, crisp, official, and with our son's name on the return address. And when I opened it, the past 4 years suddenly felt like they were rushing straight toward us again. The envelope from Travis felt heavier than it should have, like the paper itself carried all the words we never said to each other. I stood on the porch staring at it so long that Mabel finally threatened to open it with her teeth if I didn't hurry up. "I'm building suspense," I told her. She replied, "Walter, at our age, suspense raises blood pressure. Open it." Inside was a neatly typed letter, too neat, too polite, the kind of letter people write when they're trying to hide something under proper grammar. Travis wrote that he and Jenna had fallen on difficult times, that her job had been cut, that his hours were reduced, and that the house, our old house, had become financially unsustainable. Then came the line that made my eye twitch. "We were hoping to temporarily relocate to your property while we stabilize." Temporarily relocate. To our property. The same son who tossed us out with $20 now wanted a bedroom and maybe a welcome basket. I read the letter twice, then handed it to Mabel, who adjusted her glasses like she was about to grade a student's essay. As she read, I paced the porch, stepping on the same loose board over and over until it squeaked so much the neighbor's dog started howling. "Walter," she finally said, voice low, "what are you thinking?" I threw my hands up. "I'm thinking I should have framed that $20 bill he gave us. Could have hung it right here as a reminder of our generous son." Mabel shook her head, but couldn't hide her smile. "You're impossible." But something deeper churned in my chest. Not anger this time, not even resentment. It was the shock of being needed again by someone who once made sure we felt disposable. Many older parents know this strange sting. The child who pushes you away until life pushes them back. I walked inside, letter still in my hand, trying to collect my thoughts. In the kitchen, the faucet started hissing like a snake. I'd apparently turned the knob the wrong way while fixing it the day before. Water sprayed directly at me, soaking my shirt. "Perfect," I muttered, "just perfect." Mabel peeked in, took one look at me dripping like a broken rain barrel, and said, "Well, if Travis moves in, at least you're already trained not to yell when things go wrong." Her joke eased something tight in my chest. I sat at the table, water dripping off my elbows, and let the weight of the situation settle. For years of silence. For years of pretending we didn't exist. And now he wanted to come home. Not to us, but to what we'd built without him. I wasn't ready to answer him yet. I needed to think. And I needed to hear Mabel's voice in this. I always did. I turned to her, drying my glasses on a towel that somehow made them even dirtier. "Mabel," I said quietly, "I know what I feel. But what do you think about all this?" And when she finally spoke, her words changed the entire direction of our story.
When Walter handed me that letter, still damp from the faucet fiasco he tried to pretend wasn't his fault, I felt my heart thump in a way I hadn't felt since the day Travis shut the door on us. I set the paper down on the table, smoothing it twice, the way I always did when I needed a moment to steady myself. Walter kept looking at me as if I held the key to the universe, not just an opinion. "Well," I finally said, "it took him 4 years to write more than a birthday text. That's something, I suppose." Walter paced the kitchen so hard he wore a path between the fridge and the crooked pantry door. "Something," he muttered. "He wants to move in." I glanced at him over my glasses and replied, "If you keep pacing like that, you'll move in with the chiropractor." He snorted, tripped on the rug, and caught himself on the counter with the dignity of a man trying to prove gravity had nothing on him. That's my Walter, dramatic enough to rival opera, stubborn enough to outlive the opera house. But truthfully, inside me something hurt. Travis had been our pride once. Our boy with the bright grin who used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. I still kept that memory tucked somewhere quiet, even when the adult version of him forgot we existed. I'm not saying we let him waltz in, I told Walter softly. But I am saying, maybe we should listen. At least listen. Walter collapsed into the chair across from me, sighing like a man performing for an invisible audience. You've always been softer than me, he said. I shook my head. No, I just know what it feels like to lose family. And I'm tired of losing. Still, forgiveness doesn't come easy just because you're old. In fact, age sharpens the sting. I felt every wrinkle on my hands as I picked up the letter again. Every year we'd spent waiting for a call that never came. I wasn't naive anymore, not the way I was when Travis was little, and I believed love fixed everything. But I knew one thing. Shutting a door feels powerful in the moment, but it leaves you standing in the dark after. I wasn't ready to shut anything yet. Walter frowned. He didn't even apologize. I nodded. That's true. But he reached out. That's the first step. My husband rubbed his forehead as if the weight of being a father had suddenly reopened after years of being closed. I don't know what to do, Marlene. I reached across the table, gently taking his hand. Then we'll decide together. He blinked a few times, the way he always does when he's trying not to look sentimental. And then, as if the universe wanted to remind us that life still had humor left in it, the smoke alarm went off because Walter had left the toaster plugged in with nothing inside. Again. He jumped up so violently he knocked over the chair, shouting, "It's possessed." I waved a dish towel under the alarm and said, "If it is, it's just trying to escape your cooking." But when the house quieted again, so did we. We sat side by side, letter between us, the future suddenly closer than we ever expected. And I told Walter the 5 words that made him freeze in place. I think we should invite him. Walter stared at me like I'd just suggested we adopt a crocodile. His mouth hung open, one eyebrow twitched, and he gripped the table edge as if the wood might float away without him. Invite him, he repeated, voice cracking like old vinyl. Marlene, are you feeling stable? I crossed my arms. More stable than you were when you attacked the toaster with a spatula last week. He sputtered. That was self-defense. It hissed at me. I rolled my eyes. It was the timer, Walter. But underneath the banter, I saw the fear in him, fear of being hurt again, fear of giving someone who wounded us a second chance. Age doesn't make you immune to heartbreak. It only teaches you how deeply it can bury itself. Listen, I said gently, I'm not saying we hand him a key and throw a welcome parade. I'm saying we hear him out. If he's truly in trouble, we shouldn't turn our backs. Walter rubbed his face and groaned like a man sentenced to a long lecture. He tossed us out, he whispered. Like we were old bread. I nodded. And now he's the one knocking. Life has a way of spinning the wheel. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the yard we'd revived was shining under late afternoon sun, new paint on the porch rails, flowers we planted together, even the ridiculous garden gnome Walter insisted on buying because it looked like my Uncle Clyde. The house was becoming more than shelter. It was becoming us, what we could build even after being broken. And somehow, that made me want to open the door wider, not close it tighter. Walter finally stood, pacing in small, irritated circles like a bird guarding a very confused nest. What if he comes here and does it again? Takes advantage? Treats us like parents. I interrupted softly. He stopped pacing. And that silence, that one small moment, told me his anger wasn't solid. It was hollow, built on hurt, not hate. Still, I didn't push him. I simply said, let's call him. Ask him to come talk. Just talk. If he shows us the same disrespect he did before, then the answer is no. But if he comes with humility, we'll decide from there. Walter sighed so loudly the garden gnome outside probably heard him. Fine, he muttered. But I'm not promising anything. And I'm not hiding the nice cookies. If he wants a snack, he can eat the off-brand ones. I lifted an eyebrow. So you're saying you'll meet him? He grumbled. I'm saying I'll be in the room. Sitting. Possibly glaring. Before I could respond, he marched to the living room to practice his neutral father face, which looked suspiciously like he was trying to hold in a sneeze and a complaint at the same time. But despite his fussing, despite his theatrics, I knew something had shifted in him. He wouldn't admit it. Men Walter's age rarely admit emotional movement, but a door inside him had creaked open. We picked up the phone together that evening. My hand hovered over the numbers. "Are you ready?" I whispered. Walter swallowed. As ready as an old man can be before digging up a 4-year-old wound. And just as I dialed, the phone rang first. The phone ringing at that exact moment startled me so much I jabbed Walter in the ribs with my elbow. He yelped, stumbled backward, and knocked over the little table where he keeps all his important things, which turned out to be expired coupons, 3 screws he swears belong to something vital, and a flashlight without batteries. "Good grief, Marlene," he hissed, rubbing his side. "You're trying to finish me off before Travis even gets here." I shot back, "If a gentle poke knocks you over, we need to start lifting hand weights." But the phone kept ringing, sharp and insistent, and I felt something cold slide down my spine. Walter froze beside me, his chest rising and falling just a bit too fast. "Do you think it's him?" he whispered. The idea that Travis might be calling at the exact second we dialed felt like the universe nudging us with its elbow too, though much more gently than I nudged Walter. I answered, "Hello." And then I heard it, that familiar voice, but stripped of the confidence it used to wear like a suit. "Mom?" Travis said, barely above a breath. "Are you there?" My knees went weak, and I had to sit down before I dropped the phone. The last time I'd heard him speak directly to me, he'd said we were complicating his life. Now he sounded like a lost boy trying to remember the way home. "Yes, Travis," I whispered, steadying myself. "We're here. Your father is here too." Walter, pretending not to tremble, straightened his shirt and lifted his chin like a general preparing for battle. There was a pause on the line, long, heavy, full of 4 years of silence. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I should have called sooner. I didn't know how." My throat tightened. Walter's eyes widened, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't have a single sarcastic remark ready. He just stared at the phone like it might vanish if he blinked. Travis cleared his throat. "Mom, Dad, we're in a hard spot. Jenna's health hasn't been good and money's been a mess." He hesitated again, voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway." The words hung in the air like a fragile bridge he wasn't sure we'd step onto. I felt my heart ache in 2 directions at once, for the child he used to be and for the parents we'd become after years of being pushed aside. Walter finally leaned in and whispered, "Ask him when he wants to come." His whisper, of course, was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I nudged him, and he pretended he hadn't spoken at all. Trying to steady my voice, I said, "Travis, come talk to us. Face to face. We'll figure things out." On the other end, he let out a breath that sounded more like a collapse. "Thank you," he said softly. "We'll drive tomorrow morning." When I hung up, Walter sat down beside me, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if it might offer advice. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he whispered. I placed my hand on his back, rubbing slow circles. "None of us are," I said, "but we'll be ready enough." Then, suddenly, Walter shot up. "We have to clean. And hide the good cookies. And fix that wobbly chair. He'll think we can't take care of ourselves." He rushed around the room with the frantic energy of a man 20 years younger, but coordination 10 years older. At one point, he picked up the cat's scratching post and shouted, "What is this even doing in the living room? We don't have a cat." We still don't know where the scratching post came from. But beneath all his bustling, beneath all the jokes, Walter's hands were shaking just a little. Because tomorrow, our son was walking back into our lives, and this time, we weren't the ones standing outside the door. And when he finally arrived, the look on his face told us his troubles ran deeper than we ever imagined. Travis arrived the next morning with shoulders slumped so deeply it looked like life itself had been sitting on them. His car barely made it up the driveway. The engine sputtered like a man with a chest cold, and one of the headlights flickered as if winking at us out of pity. When he stepped out, he didn't stride the way he used to, that confident, slightly arrogant walk of a man who believed nothing could shake him. Instead, he moved slowly, cautiously, like someone afraid the ground might give way beneath him. Walter stood beside me, spine straight, arms crossed, trying to look stern and fatherly, But the effect was ruined by the fact that he'd accidentally put on his gardening shoes, the ones covered in dried mud and mystery stains. I nudged him. You look like you're about to scold him for stepping on your tulips. Walter whispered back, maybe I am. Travis walked toward us, and when he got close enough, I saw the exhaustion under his eyes, the kind that doesn't come from one bad night, but from months, maybe years, of life unraveling. Jenna sat in the passenger seat, pale and thin, waving timidly. My breath caught. She used to light up every room. Now she looked like a shadow of herself. Mom, Dad, Travis said, voice trembling. Thank you for seeing us. Walter cleared his throat, trying for stoic dignity, but coming off more like he had a popcorn kernel stuck somewhere. Well, he replied, we've always been here. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a bridge, a shaky, homemade one, but enough to step on. We invited them inside. The moment Travis entered, the floorboard near the hallway let out its usual dramatic groan, the one we kept meaning to fix, but somehow never did. Travis flinched, startled. Walter muttered, it likes to greet guests, as if we intentionally trained the floor to scare people. I swatted his arm gently. We sat at the kitchen table. Walter insisted on pouring coffee for everyone, even though he somehow managed to misplace the sugar jar in the fridge last night. Still a mystery unsolved. He set the cups down carefully, though he gave Travis the mug with a small chip in it. When I raised a brow at him, he whispered, testing his humility. I whispered back, give him the good mug before I test your humility. Finally, Travis spoke. His hands shook as he tried to steady them on the table. We lost the house, he said quietly. Jenna's treatments. Insurance wouldn't cover everything. My hours got cut. We fell behind. And then further behind. He swallowed hard. We've been staying with friends, but it's not enough space. We didn't know where else to go. I felt something inside me twist, a mix of sorrow, memory, and a mother's instinct that never entirely dies, even when bruised. But I didn't speak. I let him continue. I know what I did, he said, voice breaking. Throwing you out. It was the worst decision of my life. I thought I was doing what was best for us, for our independence. But I hurt you. Deeply. And I'm sorry. I really am. The kitchen fell silent. Even the old refrigerator seemed to stop humming to listen. Walter finally leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. Travis, he said slowly, we're not heartless. But forgiveness isn't something you just pick up at the store. Travis nodded, eyes wet. I know, and I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance. A long, breathless moment passed. And then, with a voice soft as a falling leaf, I said, you and Jenna can stay. Not because you asked, but because we choose to open our door. Travis let out a sigh that trembled all the way through him. Jenna wiped her eyes. And Walter, well, Walter stood so abruptly his chair skidded back and crashed into the wall. Oh, for heaven's sake, I muttered, you're going to break the house before they even move in. He whispered. My legs forgot how to react to emotions. But I saw it, the relief in his eyes, the tiny crack where love started to seep back in. We didn't know it then, but the choice we made that morning would lead to a truth we never expected, a truth Travis had not yet revealed. A truth about our new home and why he suddenly wanted to live in it. I noticed at the moment Travis stepped deeper into the house, the way his eyes lingered on the walls we'd repainted, the sturdy beams Walter reinforced, the porch rebuilt with aching backs and too many harbor store receipts. His gaze darted, measuring, calculating. Not with greed, no, not quite, but with a nervousness that made my stomach tighten. Walter, of course, didn't see any of that. He was too busy giving Jenna a blanket and fussing over how the thermostat was possessed again because he kept turning it the wrong direction. I watched Travis carefully. For years of distance had sharpened my instincts. Something was sitting heavy behind his apology, something unfinished. Finally, when Walter stepped outside to check if the porch light was judging him, his words, not mine, I looked at Travis directly and asked, why this house, sweetheart? I know you're in trouble. But trouble doesn't explain everything. He froze. His shoulders rose slowly, then dropped with a long, trembling exhale. And he said it, not with pride, not with manipulation, but with the quiet defeat of a man who'd run out of places to hide. Mom, this property is worth $700,000. My heart didn't race. It didn't jump. It simply settled, as if the last piece of the puzzle had finally clicked into place. He wasn't trying to take the house from us, not exactly. He was terrified of drowning, and he'd spotted our home as the only lifeboat left. I know how it sounds, he added quickly. But I swear, I'm not here to steal anything. I just thought, maybe if we stayed here, we'd have stability. A chance to rebuild. I'm not asking you to sell it. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for shelter. I studied his face, older, worn, humbled in ways only life can humble a man. And for the first time in many years, I saw not the son who pushed us out, but the son we raised. The boy who used to run to our bedroom during storms. The boy who trusted us completely before adulthood whispered nonsense into his ear. Walter came back inside just then, wiping his hands on his pants. Well, he announced, the porch light is fine, but I think the gnome moved. He looked between me and Travis and sensed the seriousness in the air. What did I miss? Travis repeated his confession. Walter's jaw clenched, then shifted not with anger, but with something gentler, something tired. Son, he said, lowering himself into a chair, we didn't fix this house for its price tag. We fixed it because it gave us back our dignity. And I'll be damned if we lose that again. Travis's eyes filled. I don't want to take anything from you. I just want another chance. With both of you. Walter nodded slowly. Then you'll have to earn that. Day by day. No shortcuts. That was it. No speech. No dramatic declarations. Just an honest boundary spoken by a man who'd learned the hard way that love needs protecting too. I stood behind Walter, resting my hands on his shoulders, and said quietly, this home saved us once. Now it will shelter all of us. But understand this, Travis, we don't live here at your mercy anymore. You live here at ours. And something in him softened, as if he'd been holding his breath for years and finally let it go. We spent that evening together, the four of us. Quietly, carefully, a little awkward, a little hopeful. Walter even offered Travis the good cookies, which nearly made me faint. Jenna smiled weakly for the first time in months. And when the sun dipped behind a hill, Walter wrapped his arm around me and whispered, you were right. Again, as usual, tell no one. I won't pretend everything healed overnight. It didn't. But healing began, the kind that grows slow and deep, like roots under old soil. And as I watched my husband and my son talk, really talk, for the first time in years, I understood something simple and profound. We weren't the ones who needed saving. We were the ones who had already survived. And now, finally, we had the strength to choose mercy over bitterness, without losing ourselves again. By the time I turned off the lights that night, I felt it fully. The door that once closed on us had opened, and we were the ones who opened it. On our terms. With our dignity intact.